Hello, everyone. This is Ravissh Hasan, and I'm back again with yet another podcast series for Dun and Bradstreet Data Talks podcast. We have a renowned personality here, Habibullah Khan. But before I ask you to introduce yourself, let me introduce the topic of discussion today, which is AI in supply chain. AI, as we all know, is a popular topic, and AI in supply chain, again, is making significant impact on various aspects within supply chain, potentially to enhance efficiency, reduce costs, and improve decision making in the supply chain management. So we'll focus on this. And before we dive in, Habib, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Wonderful to be here. My background is actually supply chain compliance, I think, which is going to be the topic of discussion today. So I spent 7 years in supply chain, and my last role was managing compliance for a multi-country region for a multi-billion-dollar multinational. It was a multi-country enforcement policy. I had my own team, and we were doing supplier level of reconnaissance and due diligence at that level. And then later on, of course, in my current role, where we are a global digital product and customer experience studio, we essentially work with a lot of companies that are incorporating AI into the workflows, and we build those journeys, and both B2B and B2C. And we also actually work directly with artificial intelligence companies across from both user experience and, of course, digital media. So I'm blessed to have learned with some of the most brilliant AI founders in the region. So I think a good time to combine both of those experiences and talk about generative AI and supply chain.
Great. So how important do you think it is nowadays for companies to start exploring, start researching, and start implementing the technologies related to AI in their supply chain?
So I think AI is a broad field. I would spend hours talking about AI in supply chain. The use cases are numerous. So I will restrict today to talk about generative AI in supply chain. And I think that's important because generative AI is very, very specific technology. I would say it is, if you haven't already started, you're behind, but it's okay. Start as soon as you can, whenever you're ready. You have to assign the right people to look at it, to find the right partners, and then understand how to do it. It's important to do it well. But it is, I think it goes without saying that generative AI is going to, transform compliance. Or rather, it will severely augment it, and it will greatly help make it better. So the earlier you can get on this journey, the more you will get out of it, right? So I think perhaps in the beginning, let me just talk about what the technology is. So, I mean, we know that generative AI are algorithms that can be used to create new content, right? So one does wonder that what role would they have in, say, supply chain or supply chain compliance, right? So they fall under the broad category of machine learning, so which is a type of artificial intelligence. The difference being that in machine learning, practitioners developed AI through models that learn from data patterns without human direction, what you call, say, neural networks. So the without human direction is important because even now, while we're getting output from generative AI, if you ask people how does generative AI actually work, I think there might be a handful of people who will be able to explain to you exactly, right? So that's an important point to know, that it is without human direction, and that's the fascinating thing, and that's where there are also some blind spots that emerge because of that, and so we need to be cognizant of that. I think the story really began in 2022 with the emergence of first with the image generation models, like you saw Midjourney, DALL-E, and then Stable Diffusion, and then of course ChatGPT, which was the first text generation model to break through in a major way, right? So to answer your question, what 2022 showed was this is clearly a new era in technology. I think, but from our point of view, it's important to note that technology, whenever you get these radical technology that break through to mainstream, right, and they get hyped, we need to understand that they always have two flavors. So there are those technologies that improve productivity and widely used products and services, and these are called sustaining technologies, right? And then there are those that have often little or no benefit versus say established products and services. But what they do is they create entirely new areas of value, right? So um, and the way to often tell which one is which is that incumbents have great use and make the most use of sustaining technologies, and startups and those on the fringe often use disruptive technologies. So for me, internet was a disruptive technology. It totally created new areas of value. I
Hmm.
find generative AI, while it's extraordinarily radical and it's so exciting, I find it to be a sustaining technology. And that's a very important distinction. I might be in the minority here because everyone will tell you how radical generative AI is, everybody from Bill Gates to Elon Musk. But there's a framework behind this process, right? So incumbents usually benefit from sustaining technologies, which is why you're seeing already that the greatest benefits so in search are going to Microsoft and on the existing platforms, digital platforms, cloud platforms, the way enterprise workflows are done that you subscribe to on platforms, those are all coming from major incumbent players. And disruptive technologies, startups usually benefit from. So they take the major chunk of value generation. So far to me, generative AI is a sustaining technology, which means its greatest use lie in augmenting existing products and services. Now, that's a great news for supply chain professionals because it means that they need to kind of bolt on generative AI and do whatever they're doing better. And they have almost a promise and a guarantee that generative AI will make them more productive and more efficient. Now, when you are an incumbent, you have to look at two things, right? For sustaining technologies, which is like do you capture an existing liquidity pool? So that's your captive customer base. And do you have large data pools, which is large troves of data that you have access to? So as long as you have those, you tend to benefit the most from sustaining technologies. So it's important to make this distinction because it will have an effect on the discussion we have later on. I think it would be pertinent to mention that the largest business database in the world is with Dun and Bradstreet. So that automatically puts them on the pioneering edge of being able to use generative AI. And I think should be an extremely exciting beginning of an extremely exciting epoch for them. Sorry for the long answer, but a little bit passionate about how we define this for value.
No, it completely makes sense. And I was actually coming to DNB and its offerings there, like in terms of generative AI, AI in supply chain, and you already touched base. But if you can just expand on that a little bit more and just let the audience understand as to how will this basically evolve generative AI in supply chain, and what sort of offerings can DNB or how companies like DNB can offer.
Okay, good question. So let's go a little bit more tactical, right? So we're already starting to see implementations, but it's very important to know that generative AI does have some drawbacks. So one of the ways to get past those drawbacks is to use a combination of generative AI and retrieval AI, which I believe is happening, right? So what will that combination result in? Because see, generative AI is time long. So, for example, I believe ChatGPT 4 was until 2020 or 2021 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Now, compliance, of course, is near real time. Things dramatically change. There's a war. Some multipolar alliance breaks. So within months, things can totally change. So once you combine a couple of technologies, you will get insane amounts of I would say productivity hacks. So what would those look like? Let's talk about those. Um, so you will be able to access external up-to-date knowledge sources. And so you ensure the responses are not only coherent, which is what generative AI does, but they're also rooted in fact. So this interplay between retrieval and generation will mean that unlike large language models, which need extensive retraining to update their knowledge, which is why ChatGPT 5 comes up so much after ChatGPT 4, which took so many years to come after ChatGPT 3, right?
Yeah.
Over here, your internal knowledge can be seamlessly modified without overhauling the entire system. And that's important because that will allow you to bring actual use cases, but as long as you have captive data, right? So first of all, what you'll note is that how you query the database becomes different. We are used to filling in long forms when we do compliance. So if you look at compliance professionals or professionals who are using tools to hunt for leads, or professionals who are using tools to do due diligence, or professionals who are using tools to find out the relationship of families of businesses to see are there any red flags, are any of them listed in some blacklisted lists with Western governments, etc. When you're doing that, you have to fill a lot of fields, right? And sometimes dozens. And how well you fill them and how well you slice and dice the analytics, then uh, the quality of the response depends on that, and that can be time consuming. But now you should see the querying of the database will become like using Google, right? So it's you just literally put in a sort of a probe, and you will get much better results, because as long as the quality of the data uh, is and the integrity of the data is there, right? So and I believe that when you look at the version in say Dun and Bradstreet's labs, and when they start rolling them out in the near future, your querying will be just like you're using Google, and so you will use short keywords or long keywords, or it will be like can you let me know if this company has any multinational third parties that are related to this? And is there anything I need to look out for from a financial or a legal point of view? And that's the sort of query you would put in, and it will give you the right sort of response. So no more filling of those enormous amounts of fields. And I think it's so much more intuitive. And I think it also opens it up to a lot more people who can use it as well. So a lot of business users will not have to rely on people who are specialists to get some sort of compliance done, which is what that will allow for is that it will make compliance more inclusive and accessible. And it will allow for also different ways of querying, because you see, if I have to fill in a form every time, my ability to do A/B testing is gets greatly limited by time. And A/B testing is kind of important as you're looking for stuff. I mean, you use Google, right? So you do a query, you don't like it, you change the query, right? So
Yeah.
if you can do it as intuitively as that, your ability and your ability to use the database at your disposal and get better results from it, the law of returns is very fast on that. So I think you will see that, and the beauty will be that the answers that you get are both accurate but also contextually meaningful and up to date. So you do not get hallucinations, which is a problem that generative AI working on large language models has. It literally fabricates stuff. It will it will make up facts, right? Which is a death knell for compliance. But I think that is the beauty, that we have figured out how to get past that by matching retrieval AI and generative AI, right? So, but again, this will fail if you do not have highly accurate, up-to-date data. And we know that that is done in Bradstreet's strengths, and it is. And all I will say is that this strength has the ability to give you proportional advantages on compliance, right? Because if you're sitting on large pools of highly accurate, up-to-date data, you will get the highest levels of compliance analysis, right? So, and what use cases are there? First of all, due diligence of suppliers. Now, this is getting increasingly tougher, and its need is going to be exponentially rising, because we have, in the last couple of years, we've transitioned from a unipolar world to a multipolar world, which means that there are nations which have their own backers and their own areas of influence in vying with each other on the global stage, right? So you will see a lot of sanctions. You will see a lot of Western countries putting sanctions on even advanced nations like China. So it's no longer, those axis of nations like North Korea, Iran, anybody related to that. We're talking about China, which is at the heart of global supply chain operations, right? Now, the due diligence of suppliers is going to become increasingly tough in this sort of a world, and And obviously the need is rising because the supply chains are so much more complex, and you have to be able to go to the supplier level. Otherwise, US agencies, for example, will they will get to you and they will be able to find you. Already the law states that the level of depth that is needed, and that is on you if you are a Western multinational. Your home governments has very severe expectations of your due diligence of suppliers. It's a very tricky world out there right now. So if you have the largest business database in the world, your ability to navigate through these nuances and get the right information to your clients is supreme, right? And I think that's one of the most exciting use cases is that
Yeah.
in a very complex world, the level of due diligence that people like Dun and Bradstreet should be able to do is peerless. And already you will find that one of the things that Dun and Bradstreet has started doing it, I don't know if they've rolled it out yet, is I think it'll probably happen in the near future, is that already if there are any, when you're doing this sort of an analysis and due diligence, right? If there are any flashpoints like court documents, and these are court documents are almost always matters of public record, and they're a very, very important part of the due diligence process. So you will get them for better decision making. So it's not just like, so older algorithm would just say, okay, there are a few cases and it will flag it. This will be able to look at the nuances and the sentiments and say, oh no, these were wrong cases. They were all one, so it's okay. So these are the sort of nuances you will get now that you would not get before. Um, the second would be, okay, you have a perfectly fine supplier, but do they have the financial ability to fulfill transactions? Are they gonna let me down? You know that it takes one bad supplier that stops a manufacturing, because the raw material didn't come in and it stops a manufacturing line. The damage can knock your profitability for the entire year, right? So these are some serious questions, right? So again, generative AI with the right sort of data will build you a very highly sophisticated, highly nuanced risk profile. And it will look at all these exclusionary characteristics, and it will look at everything. And 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 this is important because it is, like I said, getting tougher in this multipolar world to be able to figure this out. And people are looking deeper and deeper into a supplier. And so you identify the right supplier, but does he have the financial wherewithal to manage? Maybe he was a good supplier 3 years ago, but how are his finances doing now? Has he been hurt by the current war in Ukraine, etc.? I mean, these and so the algorithm will be able to parse the nuance as opposed to doing basic business intelligence on 3 years data or something like that. So you will see that the accuracy, so you might already be a leader, but your ability to be a runaway leader by using information well will come from using generative AI. What are the use cases? Okay. Um, if you look at large companies, right, they have complex compliance life cycles. They've got literally tens of thousands of suppliers. There are companies, and I'm talking about even emerging market companies, like if you talk about Nigeria, if you talk about Pakistan, if you talk about Bangladesh, you will see that they have some companies that have thousands of suppliers, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you increase the ambit to supplier, right? So you can, and that's one of the places where I feel that generative AI in compliance will be a boon to compliance professionals. And then, of course, your ability to get near real-time risk profiling and alerts, that becomes a lot more dynamic, because you have generative AI and retrieval AI, so combining and working together, and you are able to figure out that using whatever algorithmic pattern matching that you have, that this is not normal, or this might seem normal, but it's actually subtly and profoundly different. So I need to flag this, and so that I think will be exciting. And will it be predictive? We will have to see how the technologies are used. But I think your ability as a compliance professional to use probing and querying to figure out if you're doing risk profiling and let's say you're deciding between 2, 3 suppliers which have a material effect on your near future, right? Because they're essential suppliers. Let's say you're making, I don't know, PVC, and this is an ethanol supplier, and you're deciding between 3 and 4. So the ability of nuance that generative AI would bring to that decision, I think that would be unmatched. And I would say Another thing that we need to be extremely cognizant of, and everybody needs to have a plan for, is obviously ESG. So I think around $10 trillion of investments are already tied into ESG criteria, and this
Yeah.
is increasing at the rate of $1 to $2 billion a day. So we're literally talking about, say, $750 billion every year being added to this number. So sustainability research is a complex process on both ends, right? So if I am judging you, if you are ESG compliant, or if I want to be ESG compliant, or I have needs to be ESG compliant, it is tough, and there are many moving goalposts. So maintaining ESG standards based on requirements is also quite complex. So your ability to do sustainability research, your ability to maintain ESG standards based on requirements, this will greatly improve with generative AI's guidance, right? So you can expect generative AI to have quite an impact on if your ESG metrics are up to task, and on the other side, I expect it to mostly wipe out greenwashing, which is the hyping up of your own ESG credentials, but with nothing to back it up, right? So generative AI with the right amount of data and the right database should be able to, make those calls in a much more profound manner. And believe me, Ravish, every company needs to have an ESG play.
Mm.
And this is even if they're domestic, and internationally you are already behind, like on from a if you do not understand equity and you do not understand ESG, you are not your ability to give returns to your stakeholders is significantly diminished. So ESG is going to, and it is complex. I've seen people who work with ESG, they're like, we try, we attend, we listen to the World Economic Forum, we do what we need to do, but we're so confused, right? We don't know if we're right or not. And we go to three companies and they give us three different ratings. So you know what? I think the sort of a prophetic roadmap that will lead to the right result. I think generative AI in ESG will tell you that these are the metrics and these are how you're actually performing. And because there will be a lot of structured and unstructured data that you need to look at, right? And a lot of it might not be in the right places, or it not be in one place. So the ability to, I think, I expect companies like Dun and Bradstreet and similar credit scoring companies to be able to shine here, because I think the leadership of ESG is up for grabs globally. Who should do it, right? Who should do ESG well? To me, whoever has large captive pools of data whose integrity is assured, they should take the lead in ESG, because that will be the greatest determinant of how robust your ESG analysis is. And I think that should be an exciting time for companies that want to be ESG compliant, and also for leaders who are expecting, or large multinationals who are expecting their suppliers to be ESG compliant. I think companies like Dun and Bradstreet using generative AI in compliance will play a large part there. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that kind of answered your question.
Right. No, truly does. I was coming more towards the hiring aspect. So for companies, especially with the new age AI in supply chain these days. So
Uh-huh.
how do you see that being affected with all the new change in technology?
I think that is an excellent question, and I think my answer will be counterintuitive here. You would expect that, oh, it's generative AI, it's a technology, so we need people who are more techy. And I think nothing can be further from the truth. Um, when you are querying, right, you enter probe, right?
Mhm.
And 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 probes require, yes, they require knowledge of your sector. Surely, you need to know your business, right? But they also need cultural affinity. They need cultural context. Cultural context is critical to do probing well when you're dealing with large language models. So I will actually say that you need a new breed of engineers, and I'm going to go ahead and name them, right? I'm going to call them contextual engineers, right? So you need contextual engineers who have sort of like a generous background, and if they have a couple of sectors that they have exposed to, even better. Um, and if they have a humanities background, that's fantastic, because that will sort of give them an edge in putting stuff in cultural context. So we might think that compliance and supply chain are very, um, say, structured technical fields, but they're not. In the end, they all depend on people and lapses from people, and they're all led by people. right? And the systems are made by people, and the processes are made by people, and the governance is done by people. So that cultural context is always critical. That empathy, whether it's at a meta level or at a precise level, it is always important. And I believe that you need to hire contextual engineers in supply chain and compliance. They need to have, and if they're not exactly specialists, that's actually an advantage. They should know your field, but they've had jobs in a couple of other fields, for example. And they've had humanities background. They understand philosophy. They've done anthropology. They've done sociology. They've done a bit of social research. That stuff is actually going to come in handy. And I feel that the hiring needs to accommodate people who have the ability to put things into cultural context whenever probing is required with large language models. So uh, I'm I'm not saying that means that they shouldn't know their sector, they shouldn't know compliance. Of course they should, but that little bit of extra, if somebody has it, I think you should place your bet on them.
Okay. So where do you see this going, like in the next 10 years, let's say? What's the future like?
Uh, uh, okay, so look, uh, we are seeing change that would take years happening very fast. I've never seen this happen this fast. When you look at technology, technology usually happens in 10 to 15-year eras.
Mm.
Um, like you would say the PC age, and before that, the mainframe age. And then after that, the mobile age, with the social mobile analytics cloud stack. So technology ages happen, they're around 10 to 15 years long, and each on its own gives productivity. And combine these advanced technologies, they give proportionate productivity and all that. So you would expect the exact same thing to happen here. So what I see is that generative AI on its own will give you some sort of productivity improvements. But when it will combine with a few other technologies, you will be looking at some transformational things happening, and you will see entirely new areas of value being created. So, what sort of technologies could there be? Whenever you look at technology ages, you will see two things happen. First,
Mm.
more data is generated. So, and secondly, more devices are connected. So at the mainframe time, there were just mainframes. And then you had PCs, so you just had office PCs and then home PCs. And then you got to the mobile era when what they're like a billion mobiles, billion plus mobiles, a few billion active mobiles in the world. So now you have even more devices connected, and you have even more um, data being generated because each device generates data and on multiple points. Now you will enter the IoT era, which is enabled by another totally different style. You've got generative AI, but you also have 5G, which enable, which means that everything is faster, everything has less latency, everything is denser. So 5G giving all this data, uses that comes from IoT, combined with generative AI and retrieval AI, and combined with captive databases like Dun and Bradstreet has, what you will do is you will then be getting data not only from like I have volunteered it to you using my DUNS number or whatever. You will be augmenting that with data all the way down to device level, right? And the algorithm will be doing some insane amounts of correlation and causation for those classic use cases of building risk profiles and all that. So in 10 years, what I see is that the data sources will become a lot more, and they will go down to the device level, and all of those will combine to make what we are trying to do in compliance in supply chain, in figuring out basically in the near and medium term future, who do we work with, should we work with them, should we do this, all of that will become a lot more powerful, and it will need to, because it's like an arms race, right? People's ability to hide what they actually are is growing, and our ability to catch them at that, and to make the calls that we need to do our business well, to do compliance well, to make sure our supply chains are resilient, uh, all of that, we need to also catch up, right? So that's what I see happening. I see a lot of technologies combining to do what we keep doing, but to do it much better. And I see all of that with a lot more data streams, and all the way down to the device level, right? And I think it's going to be fascinating to have all that data. And I'm really excited to see what companies like Dun and Bradstreet and other companies who are data services company are going to do with all of that.
Interesting.
It's hard though. It's hard to make a call, but based on how the past stages have panned out, that's my call.
Yeah, definitely the future will tell. Any last comments, notes, that you would like to mention?
Uh, I, look, I would say that we always think that compliance issues happen to other people, and I would say it's only a matter of time before it happens to you. And I would say, even if you feel that you have a domestic profile, you have a national profile, you're not exporting among the borders, you don't feel that you need your regulator, you're not very well regulated in the sector you're in, all that. To just be an efficient business, right? You need to have knowledge about yourself, and you need to compare it to other similar businesses in your country and in other countries. That frame of reference is better than any consultant you'll be able to hire. So what I would say is that use the right amount of tools, get the right partners, but get that frame of reference in
Mm.
your national and internationally about companies in your sector and companies in your region, and figure out, where do I stand among those, right? I think the value of that in your strategic informed decision making will be tremendous. And yeah, that's my parting thing, that please figure out who has that data and work with them, and get a frame of reference and get yourself measured up. I mean, it is the sort of information that ambitious, courageous leaders will ask for and will use to make themselves better.
Thank you. I'm sure DNB can definitely help around this.
Oh yeah,
So
sure, 100%.
yeah, so even in terms of the application of AI, specifically in supply chain, we are coming up with upcoming new products around the same technology. So please reach out, and we would be happy to help. Thank you, Habib. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to have you here.
It was wonderful being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.